One day, sweetheart, this house will be yours. My mother spoke those exact words while my sister stood on the back deck of my property, pointing out across the water as if she already held the deed. They were talking to my 8-year-old niece, Zelda, before I could even choke down my drink. My mother turned to me. She wore a calm, sickening smile. It was the settled, entitled look a landlord gives a tenant right before handing over an eviction notice. I set my glass down on the wooden railing. The ice cracked sharply against the rim. "Since when do you have a say about my house?" The breeze coming off the lake completely died. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Neither of them apologized. Neither of them looked embarrassed. They just stared at me, completely unbothered by my question, as if I were a misbehaving servant interrupting a private meeting. My mother pushed her chair back, gripped my elbow, and steered me hard toward the sliding glass door. Her manicured nails dug sharp and deep into my skin. "Stop being so selfish," she hissed, her breath sour with white wine. "You have no husband and no children. Your sister has a real family to raise. Your brother-in-law drew up a family trust yesterday. You are going to sign this property over to his name to secure Zelda's future. It is your duty to this family." My pulse hammered against my ribs. This was a coordinated ambush. They came to my home, ate my food, and sat on the deck I built with my own 2 hands just to strip me for parts. I am 34 years old. My name is Miliora. I own a general contracting firm. I spend 12 hours a day managing roughnecks, sourcing concrete, and fighting with city inspectors over commercial building codes. I built my life on sweat, calluses, and an absolute refusal to fail. But inside my family dynamic, my title meant absolutely nothing. To them, I was just the unpaid help. I was the convenient, unmarried pack mule with the big house, the open wallet, and the endless capacity to absorb their problems. My sister, Vera, treated my time like community property. 2 weeks before that cookout on the deck, she dumped Zelda at my front door exactly 10 minutes before my final bid meeting on a massive commercial build. She dropped a sticky purple backpack onto my pristine hardwood floor and immediately backed away toward her shiny sport utility vehicle. "I have a nail appointment," she whined, already fishing for her keys. "Just put a movie on for her. You do not even have a real boss anyway." She drove off, leaving me holding a ringing phone in one hand and a crying 8-year-old in the other. I lost that commercial bid. I lost 6 months of preparation because my sister needed a French manicure. My mother, Kimberly, was infinitely worse. She treated my home like her personal country club. I walked in one Thursday evening, exhausted and covered in white drywall dust, to find 3 of her church friends camped out in my home office. They pushed my drafted architectural blueprints aside to make room for a massive charcuterie board. A wet, sweating wine glass sat dead center on a structural schematic. The red condensation soaked right through the heavy paper, blurring the foundation lines into a permanent pink smudge. A $4,000 draft ruined in seconds because my mother refused to use a coaster. I swiped the glass off the table. It shattered against the floorboards, spraying red wine across the baseboards. The church friends gasped, clutching their pearls. Kimberly barely blinked. She crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "You just wear a hard hat for a living," she scoffed, waving her hand at the mess on the floor. "Stop acting like you are some chief executive officer. Go get a towel before it stains your own floor." The everyday disrespect was a slow bleed. It was 1,000 tiny paper cuts meant to keep me small, meant to remind me that my boundaries were entirely theoretical. But the real violence came later. A week after the blueprint disaster, I caught my brother-in-law, Nolan, inside my office. My heavy metal filing cabinet hung wide open, He stood over my desk, leafing through a thick stack of my personal tax returns, banking statements, and property deeds. His golf tan looked slick and oily under the harsh overhead light. "Those belong to me," I snapped. I stepped forward and ripped the heavy manila folder out of his grip. Nolan's face turned a violent shade of crimson. The veins in his thick neck bulged against his collar. He planted his heavy hand square on my chest and shoved me backward with all his weight. My heavy work boots slipped on the rug. I flew backward and crashed hard against the sharp granite edge of the kitchen island. A sickening crack echoed through the room. Blinding pain exploded through my right shoulder blade. I collapsed onto the floorboards, gasping for air. The tax papers rained down around me like dead leaves. Vera stood exactly 3 feet away. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, turned her back, and swiped at her screen. She literally pretended to read a text message while I gasped on the floor. Kimberly sat on the bar stool, completely calm. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her Chardonnay. She looked down at me, her eyes dead and cold. "Women who talk back get what is coming to them," my mother said, her voice smooth as glass. "You provoked him. Apologize to your brother-in-law right now." I stared up at her. The ache in my shoulder burned deep into the muscle, radiating down my spine. She told me to apologize. She did not know that physical shove was the exact moment I stopped being her daughter and started being her executioner. I drove to the emergency room in total silence. The doctor diagnosed a deep tissue contusion and a hairline fracture in my scapula. I took the medical report, folded it perfectly in half, and slid it into my glove compartment. I drove home, poured a cup of black coffee, and locked my office door. My shoulder throbbed with a dull, rhythmic agony, a constant reminder of the war that had just been declared. I needed to know why Nolan was desperately digging through my financial records. I logged into the state contractor database. I pulled up my active permit screen. The truth flashed across the monitor, cold and undeniable. My electronic contractor seal was stamped across 3 different residential addresses in the next county. 3 massive flip houses. I never stepped foot on those properties. Nolan stole my digital signature. I pulled up the inspection logs. The structural reports were a complete nightmare of unmitigated greed. Sagging concrete foundations, illegal electrical splices hidden behind drywall, unpermitted load-bearing wall removals. A bright red flag sat at the very top of the file. The state board was already investigating. The properties were condemned pending a massive federal review. The pieces locked together like a loaded gun. They did not just want my lake house to secure Zelda's future. Nolan needed liquid cash to flee the state before the federal indictments came down. His plan was flawless in its absolute cruelty. He intended to force me to transfer my house to his trust, sell it for cash, and disappear into the wind. As the registered contractor on record, the state would come looking for me. I was staring down the barrel of millions in fines. I was staring at federal prison. My own family engineered a trap to sacrifice my life so they could maintain their lifestyle. I drove straight to their subdivision. I hammered my fist against Nolan's heavy oak door until the wood rattled. He opened it, wearing a cashmere sweater and a smug, arrogant grin. I shoved the printed permit records right into his chest. He did not flinch. He leaned against the doorframe, crossed his arms over his chest, and laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Call the state board," he sneered. "Tell them someone stole your digital seal? You think they care? Your name is on the paperwork. Meliora. You take the fall. Unless..." His voice dropped to a toxic, threatening whisper. "Unless you sign the lake house over to my trust by Friday. You cooperate, and maybe I use the house money to fix those properties before the state shuts them down. You fight me, and I report you for gross negligence myself. I will tell them you took my investment money and built death traps." He cornered me. He held all the cards, And he knew it. He expected me to crumble. He expected the obedient pack mule to lower her head and take the beating. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I forced my hands to shake. I let my voice crack, playing the exact role they assigned me. "Okay," I whispered, staring down at my scuffed work boots. "You win. I will sign the house over." Nolan smirked. He turned to walk back inside, utterly satisfied with his dominance. "Wait," I said, keeping my posture slumped and defeated. "I have a contact, an East Coast investor. He buys distressed flip house portfolios in cash. I sent him the property details this morning before I realized what you did. He called me an hour ago. He wants to buy out all 3 properties for $2 million. Nolan stopped dead in his tracks. Raw greed washed over his face, wiping away the smugness. $2 million. He wants to close fast, I added. I invited him to my house for dinner on Thursday to sign the paperwork. We can do the family trust transfer from my house at the exact same time. One big signing. You get the $2 million. And you get my lake house. Nolan's eyes practically glazed over. He nodded slowly, his mind already spending the cash on luxury cars and golf memberships. Thursday, have the house deed ready. Meliora. I walked back to my truck. My hands stopped shaking the second I closed the heavy metal door. I did not just find a wealthy investor. I contacted an undercover state fraud investigator. I handed over every piece of evidence, every IP address, every stolen digital signature log. Nolan wanted a signing party. I was going to give him a public execution. Thursday night arrived. The air in my dining room felt thick and electric. Nolan walked in wearing a custom-tailored navy blazer and a smug, impenetrable grin. He carried himself like a titan of industry, eager to perform for his new, wealthy audience. Kimberly trailed right behind him, draped in heavy pearls and reeking of expensive floral perfume. Vera kept her head down, her eyes darting nervously around the room, dragging a chair out without saying a single word. The East Coast investor sat at the head of my dining table. His real name was Agent Vance, lead investigator for the State Fraud Division. Tonight, he wore a razor-sharp charcoal suit and a heavy silver watch. He played the part of a ruthless, cash-heavy buyer flawlessly. Nolan practically drooled over him. Before the appetizers even hit the table, Nolan launched into a massive, arrogant monologue about his genius real estate portfolio. He bragged about his aggressive timelines. He boasted about cutting out bureaucratic red tape. He performed his carefully crafted country club facade, desperate to prove he belonged at the big table with the heavy hitters. Kimberly beamed with pride. She took a long sip of my expensive wine, pointed a manicured finger at me, and laughed. "See," she announced to the table, her voice ringing off the walls. "Sacrificing for your brother-in-law was the right choice. Maybe now you are finally useful to this family." She turned to Vance, her voice dripping with fake, sugary sweetness. "My daughter plays with hammers and dirt all day. We are just so relieved Nolan is here to manage the adult finances." Nolan chuckled, adjusting his silk tie. "Do not worry. Meliora," he sneered, looking down his nose at me. "Men's brains are just built for high-stakes finance. You leave the heavy lifting to me." I sat in dead silence. I kept my hands folded in my lap and stared right through him. Vance smiled a cold, calculating smile. He reached into his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. He slid them directly across the polished wood toward Nolan. "My backers are ready to wire the $2 million tonight," Vance said. His voice smooth and authoritative. "But we need a clean break. The state is sniffing around those 3 properties. We need full indemnification. We need it on the public record that you, Nolan, had 100% operational, financial, and legal control over these builds from day one. We need you to officially claim total liability. We do not want any original contractors coming out of the woodwork to sue us later." Nolan did not even read the fine print, blinded by the promise of $2 million and his own massive, fragile ego. He grabbed his gold-plated pen. "Oh, absolutely," Nolan boasted, his chest puffed out like a peacock. "I ran the whole show. Every wire, every nail, every permit. Meliora here was just a rubber stamp. I am the sole mastermind." He pressed the pen to the paper. He signed his name with a violent, triumphant flourish. He pushed the document back across the table, flashing a mouthful of bright white teeth. Vance picked up the contract. He checked the signature. He folded the paper neatly and slipped it into his breast pocket. He did not reach for a checkbook. Vance reached to his belt. He unclipped a heavy silver badge and slammed it down in the dead center of my dining table. The metal cracked against the wood like a gunshot. "State Fraud Investigation Unit," Vance commanded, his voice dropping the Wealthy Investor Act instantly. The air in the room shattered. The blood completely drained from Nolan's face. His golf tan turned a sickly, ashen gray. His jaw unhinged. Sweat instantly beaded across his forehead, shining under the chandelier. His confident posture collapsed, his shoulders caving inward like a crushed aluminum can. The illusion of his superiority evaporated in a fraction of a second. Kimberly shrieked, a raw, guttural sound of pure panic. She shot out of her chair, her wine glass tipping over and bleeding dark red across the white tablecloth. "No," she screamed, her eyes wide with terror. "This is a mistake. He is a good man." She spun around and delivered a vicious, echoing slap right across Vera's face. "Why did you not stop this?" Kimberly shrieked at her own golden child. Vera burst into hysterical tears, clutching her red cheek, completely paralyzed by the sudden violence. Vance stood up, towering over Nolan. He read him his Miranda rights for massive contractor fraud, grand larceny, and forgery. Two uniformed officers stepped out from my hallway, their heavy boots thudding against the floorboards, handcuffs rattling in their grips. Nolan's breathing turned into shallow, panicked gasps. His eyes darted wildly around the room, finally locking onto me. He looked like a trapped rat staring at an exterminator. I stood up slowly. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the medical report documenting the deep tissue bruising and the fractured scapula. I tossed it onto the table, right next to Vance's silver badge. "You wanted my signature, Nolan?" I asked, my voice cold enough to freeze water. "You just gave me yours." The officers hauled Nolan up. The handcuffs clicked tight around his wrists. He stumbled forward, completely stripped of his arrogant swagger. Vera chased after them, sobbing uncontrollably. Zelda was safe upstairs. I had given her noise-canceling headphones and a movie an hour before dinner. She never heard a single shout. Kimberly collapsed onto the front porch, dropping heavily to her knees. She clawed frantically at the hem of my jeans, her makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "Please, Meliora," she wailed, her voice cracking into a pathetic whimper. "Tell them to stop. Drop the charges. He is family. I am your mother. You have to fix this." I stared down at her, my pulse perfectly steady. I stepped back, forcing her grip off my jeans. "You told me there is no mine in this family," I said. "So this prison sentence is his, and this humiliation is yours. I resign from this family." I stepped into my foyer and pulled the heavy door shut right in her face. The deadbolt slid into place with a loud crack. Through the glass, I watched the police lights fade down my driveway. 7 months later, I sat in the county courthouse and watched the judge raise his gavel. He sentenced Nolan to 12 years in state prison, with no parole for 8 years. The court also ordered a $1,422,000 restitution to demolish and rebuild the hazardous flip houses. Vera lost everything. Her car was repossessed. Her home went into foreclosure, and by late October, she filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The fallout hit Kimberly where it hurt most: her pristine social standing. Her church politely asked her to step down from the steering committee, and her friends completely cut her off. She became a ghost in her own subdivision, too ashamed to show her face. That winter, I found a cream-colored envelope in my mail. It was a 4-page letter of frantic, delusional cursive from Kimberly. She tried to rewrite history, claiming Nolan merely made a foolish business mistake. On the final page, she wrote the exact toxic sentence I knew was coming. I am still your mother, Meliora, and it is your duty to bring this family back together before it is too late. I stood at the curb, my hands perfectly steady, and dropped the pages straight into the recycling bin. I walked back inside and let the silence answer for me. By spring, the heavy dread in my house evaporated. I replaced the toxicity with my chosen family. I hosted a Memorial Day barbecue packed with people who actually added value to my life. They respected my time and my boundaries. Nobody demanded a piece of my paycheck. During the party, I accidentally knocked a stack of plates off the counter. They shattered with a loud crash. I braced myself, expecting an exasperated sigh or a vicious comment. Instead, my foreman Marcus just grabbed a broom and started sweeping. It was a small moment, but it hit me hard. This is what a healthy system looks like. You drop something, and people help pick it up. They don't demand you apologize for taking up space. People ask if it hurt to watch my mother cry that night, or if I regret breaking up the family. The truth is, the mother I was mourning never existed. In a toxic system, you are conditioned to believe love requires brutal sacrifice. People like Kimberly and Nolan use the word family as a weapon of compliance. They groom the strongest member to be the beast of burden, demanding endless labor and financial bailouts while offering zero respect. That physical shove in my office wasn't an accident. It was exactly how they viewed me: an object in their way, a tool to be used and discarded when I was no longer profitable. They didn't love me. They loved the convenience of my labor and my bank account. The moment I stopped providing, my value dropped to zero. If you are the designated fixer in your family, you need to hear these 3 rules. I paid a massive price in tears and shattered trust to learn them. Rule number 1. Blood is a biological fact. Loyalty is an earned privilege. Sharing DNA doesn't give someone the right to dismantle your life or compromise your safety. You don't owe anyone your future just because you share a past. Rule number 2. The enabler is just as dangerous as the abuser. When Nolan shoved me, Vera stood there and stared at her phone. Cowards who watch you get destroyed to protect their own comfort are active accomplices. Never mistake their silence for innocence. Rule number 3. Never negotiate with a parasite. Amputate. You cannot outlove a narcissist or buy their respect. They view generosity as weakness. The only language a parasite understands is consequence. When a boundary is crossed, enforce it with absolute precision. You must be willing to let them hate you to protect yourself. I am Meliora, and I am finally free. If you fell down tomorrow, who in your house would help you up? And who would complain that you're in the way? Stop paying rent on love that doesn't exist. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to evict a toxic family member, and share this with the strongest person you know.